prepared about 10 or 15 minutes of talents of my own to entertain you. More like 4 or 5 minutes of entertainment, maybe. Are there any English teachers or retired English teachers out there tonight? Good. Fantastic. I prepared a haiku for tonight. Those of you who know me know that that's funny just in itself. Haikus are easy, but sometimes they don't make sense. Refrigerator. Thank you. So let's get started on why we're here tonight. We have some fantastic people to recognize and some people who are going to talk about them. So without any further ado, I'd like to begin with our first inductee, Susan DeMuth. And Susan will be introduced by Dorothy Hotchkiss. There will be 2 plaques. One will be given to the inductee tonight, and the other plaques will be in the Wall of Pride hallway at the high school. Susan DeMuth, our first inductee.
There. Good evening, everybody. This is a great honor for me to be able to share some information with you about Susan. I met Sue actually in the early 70s. My family moved to Dansville. We lived on Health Street, and it was probably in one of the very cold February days when there wasn't a whole lot of snow, but the ground was frozen, and it was frozen hard. And there was an empty lot next to our house at that time, and I heard all this noise and kind of commotion going on in this empty lot. So I went out and I looked out the window, or the door actually, and there was this young woman and young man bouncing off the ground, chasing this very, very, very large dog. And it was having its own way. The dog was running, the kids were running. Every now and then they'd lunge out after the dog, bounce off the hard ground, and they would make quick comments to each other, like trying to do strategy. Well, I watched them for a while, feeling sorry for them as they were bouncing off the hard ground. And I yelled out the door, "Do you want any help?" And this young lady jumped up off the ground and said, "Nope, we've got it." With the smile that you see and the laugh that she has, even then bouncing off the ground. She was chasing their family dog with her brother John, and they were through the neighborhood. I never saw them again, but she said that was kind of a traditional thing they did now and then, was chase the dog through the neighborhood. Everybody loved the dog. But that was Susan, and that's who she was then. And amazingly enough, all of these years I've had the opportunity to be working with Susan at different levels, with different jobs, focusing on different things. And the message that I want you to know about Susan, it was always, how can I help you? What do you need? How can I help you do this? Because I had great ideas, but I could not create them with the talent that Sue had. Sue certainly had talent. She graduated from Dansville. She went to Syracuse. She received her degree. She came back to the town of Dansville with her husband Randy, and they raised their family here. And they have invested in our community time and time again. And Susan not only wanted to help the community, but she and her husband have invested in the community, and they have been the example to young business people by doing what they say they're going to do, which is investing in our community. She created Shapes, Etc., which I would presume most everybody in this room at some time used a shaped notepad. If it wasn't simply to write a note, it was to use it for a craft or help to educate, help to move on, but to know that someone in your own community created that, designed it, and with their company of Shapes, Etc., They not only allowed Dansville to enjoy them, but they sold them throughout the United States and Canada. Susan was president of that company until 2013. And then they invested in Dansville Stationers. She and her husband invested again in the community on Main Street, which is, as retailers, Main Street may not be the best place to have a retail business. But they looked beyond that and they invested on Main Street. And then they also created dogwood trading companies, which brought a whole new element of gifts and knowledge, and with their marketing to the community, drew more people. And that was the thing that Randy and Sue have continuously done. They've traveled, they've experienced, they've studied, they've looked into how can they create more of a traffic pattern within our own community. Again, they were helping by being the example to those around them. Susan also served on the Board of Education, and then there's that long list of things that she has done to volunteer within our community, the commitment to the Dansville Business District. She volunteered, she took over her mother's job of walking up and down the street, visiting the individual businesses, encouraging them to participate, and helping them to have ideas how to better themselves. She also worked with the Main Street Grants. She was part of the Key Revitalization Committee. She worked with the Department of Transportation to improve Main Street. She served on the Historic Preservation and Development Committee. She also worked with the National Register for Historic Places. She was an integral part of founding the Winter in the Village, which we've all enjoyed. And now most recently, she has supported Dansville Artwork, something that again brings a new element to our Main Street, and knowing that it was only going to improve traffic and tourism. She has always been willing to help, but the exciting thing about Sue is that she's willing to help by helping you. She often will say, if you have an idea and it can be constructive, how can I help? That's something she'll say. So as she has been honored here tonight, going to be inducted, we want to make sure that you realize what a gift we have in Sue's desire to help, to be creative, to be the entrepreneur that she is, and she considers it important to do it locally. On behalf of Kathleen Sullivan, it's an honor to present Susan Burdick DeMuth as a 2018 Wall of Pride inductee, an inspirational community leader that leads by example.
It's been a lot of fun, and I like to do my stuff in the background. I'm not a super public kind of person, but I have a lot of help in all of the crazy things that I do. Dorothy and I quite often meet at the sunrise and dream up all sorts of fun things to do. But Beth Doty has helped a lot, Salon, Nicole, Heidi Strand-Bugman. We continue to work on Winter in the Village, and the last couple of years we've been doing a Fill the Bus initiative that the bus garage started, and we started something called First Friday. So the first Friday of every month we try to do a special event. In November, it's Simple Abundance is the theme, and participating businesses downtown will be collecting things to theme Christmas with Claire and Can, and the school bus will move around them. So there's always something fun, and I look out and I see lots of faces of who can I enlist to help me do this? So it continues to be fun, and thank you, Doris. Oh, congratulations. Thank you very much.
One more round of applause for Ms. Susan DeMuth. Our next inductee, Dr. Joan Flender. Will be introduced by Andy Starr.
She In 1980, Tri-County Family Medicine brought their first pediatrician to town. She was their first female physician and incredibly young, full of energy, very short. Joan had a passion for things being done honestly, intensely, and mostly her way. At home, that means we raised 3 wonderful boys together, cared for many dogs, bred guinea pigs, and the dishwasher had to be loaded in a certain way. Joan started her own practice solo, caring for patients 24/7. Then she was joined by Diane Rapp, and the two of them shared work and call for many years. Those middle-of-the-night calls every night, her midnight runs to the delivery room for a sick baby. When I was away on business, she would drag the boys with her to Noise to take care of the kids. She must have been good at it because the practice grew until parents were bringing their kids from Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, and beyond. She advocated for special needs children in the schools. She cared for children at our local Witter House. She supported Rotary Camp by volunteering for the past 35 years. Her talent lies in an amazing ability to find and supervise the best treatment for each individual person. She can diagnose physical and emotional problems quickly and correctly and provide the best solutions available, from a newborn baby to an 18-year-old teen to a 28-year-old teen. She has helped the Dansville schools and other districts in the area provide a better education for all our kids. She's arranged balloon rides for kids in wheelchairs, soccer camp for handicapped kids, cars for parents with no transportation, support for kids to be the first in their family to go to college, and advanced placement courses for those kids looking for a challenge. She wanted to bring quality health care to a small town. She also wanted to live near the ocean, but I brought her to Dansville instead. I think it worked out okay.
Thank you. Whatever I did was a community effort. Part of my community sits back there. Dr. Rapp, Diane Rapp, as Andy said, if you'd stand up, was as integral in my life as anybody could be. We really hope that the young folks we're bringing up will continue providing health care for the kids in our town and for the schools. Thank you very much.
Let's have one more round of applause for Dr. Joan Fleming. Our next inductee, Dr. William Packard. Introduced by Sherry Packard.
When our children were in the 4th grade, they had to put together a heritage book. And one of the questions put to them was, how did your parents meet? From that point on, they would love to tell people that our parents met in the emergency room during a code blue and the patient died. That was 41 years ago, and that was the beginning of my adventure of learning. When Will and I met, he had just come back from his trip from around the world, and I never tired of the stories that he told. I learned about herding sheep and fly fishing in New Zealand, climbing a volcano and hiking the jungles of Indonesia, and about snorkeling in Barbados. But I soon learned that beyond the adventures, there was a man who cared deeply about his fellow human beings. Yes, he was valedictorian of Dansville class of 1964, graduated from Hamilton College at the top, and went and attended Columbia University for med school and accomplished many things in his life and has garnered a few awards, as you can read in your program. But for me, it was more about who he is as a physician and a person. If you could read between the lines of your program, you would see what I have witnessed over the years. I witnessed the adoration of his patients because he took the time to listen and to learn about them beyond their disease and their cancer. He became part of their families. We would be involved in their gatherings, whether it was a wedding, a branding, a ranch outing, or a funeral. On his day off, which usually turned into an afternoon off, I would accompany him when he made house calls, and sometimes traveling quite a distance. Making money was not his priority either, for often he would not charge patients until Medicare stepped in and said he couldn't do that anymore. He set up a fund for them. When they struggled with everyday expenses, he would give them money for rent, groceries, prescriptions. And there wasn't a housekeeper, janitor, or cafeteria person he didn't know by name, and sometimes the names of their family members as well. From the very beginning of our marriage, Will started a family tradition at Christmas to buy gifts for families in need. Something he said he learned from his family. What started out as a simple tradition became quite involved over the years. Will realized that hospital employees sometimes fell through the cracks because of how much money they made and couldn't afford or couldn't qualify for assistance. And they wore uniforms. It was difficult to tell who was in need and who wasn't. So he would contact the supervisors in every department for a list of employees who were struggling. The list grew so large that we had to enlist people to help us wrap, buy gifts, or even take a family. And then he would go around gathering money from all of the physicians. He was known as Santa in the hospital. And he's kind of looking that way. There were times that he was so busy that it was difficult to find the energy to keep the tradition going, but he would dig deep and make it happen. But the one thing that makes me the most proud is his willingness to advocate for his patients. In his inability to successfully retire, he has been working at an indigent care clinic. Quite often, you can find him in the office of one of our senators or our congressmen, campaigning and advocating for the poor and the immigrants in our community. So on behalf of myself and our 4 wonderful children, Jeff, Jeremy, Morgan, and Will, I introduce to you my best friend, Dr. William Patrick.
Thank you all for coming. I did not hear this speech before she gave it. I think she was worried sick about it. And thank you. That's really nice. I'm trying to say something profound in a setting like this. But every time you try to say something profound, it comes out bad. So you're better off just leaving it alone. So this won't be profound. In September of 1951, think back, all you people in class of 54, we were starting kindergarten. And 5-year-old stood on the sidewalk of the school street staring at the old elementary school. His mother had just let him off from the car. It was pouring rain. Just as well, because the poor kid was crying his eyes out. It wasn't so much that he was frightened of going to school. After all, I had Mrs. Kennel for a teacher, and she was easy. And school's kind of fun. But what he was mortified, because his mother, stand up, Mom. She make you stay all the time. Because his mother had him dressed up in a bright yellow rain slicker, with a bright yellow rain hat, and black buckle arctics.
He was mortified. He was mortified. Good God, even a 5-year-old knows you can't run around like that. Such humiliation. Thus began my first exposure to the Dansville school system, standing there in a yellow raincoat crying. It is of note that I never wore that outfit again, ever. Even a 5-year-old can figure out a way to get rid of a yellow raincoat. I spent my next 12 years in Dansville High School. Well, not in high school. It sounds good, doesn't it? Could have done that too. Hey, Billy, White, where are you? How many years you spent in high school? Spent my next 12 years in the Dansville school system preparing for college and eventually medical school at Columbia. I hated New York, by the way, and I would like to go back maybe sometime with money, not being poor, not going to medical school there. I don't think, looking back, I could have had a better education had I gone to a private school, gone to a city school. I really honestly believe that what education I had here in Dansville was as good as it could have gotten at the time. My wife and I both pledged that our children would attend public schools. We really meant that, and they did. My granddaughter, Zoe, however, was enrolled at a charter school in Lafayette, Colorado. When her mother told my wife about this, my wife sat quietly at the breakfast table and said, well, la-di-da. We do believe in public schools. Public schools reflect real life, and I think what we have here in Dansville is really good. Certainly my education was enhanced at the hands of superb teachers and some people here in the audience who were classmates. Frank Basta taught me how to love literature. Mr. Marks made sure I could get through the calculus at college. Lucille Higgins just plain maybe do whatever she wants. She scared me so much. And that was just, God knows we can't really scare people into learning, although she does. And we can't force students to learn, but it is a responsibility of our schools to provide the tools and equipment that allow our students to be successful. Certainly, Dansville High School did that for me and my classmates, and probably for Diane. And so, one of my favorite quotes is, "Students are candles to be lit, not bushel baskets to be filled." And I think that those are sentiments which all educators at all levels should remember. Light the candles, don't crush everything into the basket. Unfortunately, someone forgot to inform the medical school professors about that idea, and we became bushel baskets, crammed with facts and knowledge, and that's what we all became. And I fear that the cost of this form of education was a loss of humanity. Maybe Diane felt that, maybe Dr. Flanders felt that. Too many young physicians now, and I teach at the university with residents and medical students, but too many are technically brilliant and materially astute, but no one has taught them how to hold a hand, no one's taught them how to give a loving word at the right moment. And in a world where ethical dilemmas abound, there's little instruction in basic medical ethics. I'm always disappointed in that area when my students come out to Scottsbluff to train. It all comes down to education, after all, from preliminary graduate schools and on up even further. We must remember families are an integral part of this education, and try though they might, our schools can't do everything. I think that this foundation, this dinner tonight, it's a great idea, and of course, you know, why wouldn't I say that? I just got an award. At any rate, a word about your hospital here. About 4 weeks ago, the chairman of your board here at the hospital took me on a 2-hour tour through the hospital. I've practiced in 3 different countries, one being New Zealand, where socialized medicine happens and where universal health care is provided. It's tough, but it can be done. I just want you all to know that. It takes people to say on both sides, we want this to happen. You know? And we want this to happen. We want everyone to be cared for. You can sure break it apart and do lots of things to prevent it from happening, but in the end, we end up paying more if we don't provide it, because people come in later, they come in sicker, and it costs even more to take care of them. At some point, we have to find a way to get together and make this work. Your hospital, it's kind of hard to comprehend how a community this size can have such a well-equipped facility. It's incredible. I come from a community area that has about 35,000 people, and we have lots of things. And we're in the core of Nebraska, and there's nobody else around, and we can do exactly what we want, and do it a little differently than we have to be forced to if we were in Omaha or Lincoln. Your hospital has CAT scanners, it has PET scanners, it has ultrasound machines, it has infusion centers for delivering chemotherapy to cancer patients. A town this size doesn't really deserve that. And yet you really do deserve that. It's unheard of for a town of less than 20,000 people to have a PET scan. PET scans are really sophisticated instruments. Infusion centers for cancer drugs are amazing. You have both. Your CEO, who I met a month ago, is truly a wise and insightful woman. She's dedicated to this institution. You can tell that just by talking to her. She's dedicated to its welfare. She has no outside agenda. She just wants to be here and take care of this hospital. That's Amy Pollard, in case you don't know. She could stand up too for a second. The chairman of the hospital board is Graham Fraser, who happens to be my brother-in-law. So I have no reason to do this and say good things about it. But he spends more time in that hospital. He goes in every morning. He spends more time in the hospital a week than my chairman of my board does in a year. He's there. He knows what's going on. He knows how the hospital is run, and it just makes me laugh because he has this little identification tag. Have you ever seen it? On one side it says Graham, chairman of the board, and you turn it over, and the other side says Graham, engineering consultant, which is kind of like a good name for a janitor, but he's there doing it. He's there doing it, and I think these two people are pretty amazing, and have just kind of worked hard to bring the hospital to its present state. We need younger doctors. We need more patients here. There's no question. But this is, if I were 15 years younger, this would be a place to practice. This is an outstanding hospital. Don't let it fall apart. This is a great place, and you're fortunate to have such a place. Thank you all for coming and supporting the foundation.
First time a doctor's ever tried to take my homework. One more round of applause for Dr. William Packard. Our next inductee, Lynn Pickard, accepted by John Vanderhoof, and will be introduced by David Gilbert. Thank you. The year 1927 was a year of change in the Dansville area. The year when things became other things. It was the year that Hal Foster's Power Specialty Company, with its factory in Cumminsville, underwent a corporate merger and became Foster Wheeler. It was the year that Stony Brook Glen officially became Stony Brook State Park. And on October 2nd, 1927, one of the largest crowds in local history, possibly as many as 15,000, crowded together on what had been an ordinary meadow to enjoy an aerial circus at Dansville's brand new airport. Two people in particular can be credited with making Dansville's airport a reality. One was the man who, in 1927, was the most famous person in the world. Charles Lindbergh's history-making solo flight across the Atlantic, which took place in May of that year, brought on a nationwide craze for airplanes and aviation, which resulted in the creation of hundreds of landing fields from coast to coast. The other man was Dansville's own Lynn Ernest Pickard, whose love of flight had already consumed nearly half his life. Born in West Sparta, Pickard graduated from Dansville High School in 1910. The following year, he was witness to the first ever airplane flight in Dansville history, when a biplane manufactured in Bath came to Dansville as part of that year's Old Home Week celebration, and made several takeoffs and landings on the nursery field that is now occupied by Dansville's schools. Pickard was smitten, and the memory of that day would stick with him through his years at Colgate University, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in 1914, and his subsequent years working for the FAO and Publishing Company. When the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps, where he would be commissioned as a pilot with combat rating, although the war ended before he got to see any action. After the war, he obtained both a commercial pilot's license and an actual aircraft, a Wacko biplane that he would take up at every opportunity. An airplane in flight became a common sight in Dansville, whereas in most other places it was still something of a rarity. To pay the bills, he sold life insurance, although one wonders how pricey his own policy may have been, given the perils of his chosen hobby. At least once he did come close to cashing in his chips, when at 7,600 feet, his steering cables decided to stop working. And no, he didn't have a parachute. Few aviators used them in those days. He wound up in the hospital. Happily, Dansville had one by then. But although seriously injured, he escaped with his life. When he did land safely, Pickard's chosen spot was a field just off Maple Street. Not that Dansville's roly-poly topography offered many other options. And it was his long-held dream that that 50-acre parcel of land would be rendered into a genuine certified airport. Local support was lukewarm at best until 1927, when Dansville, like everywhere else, found itself caught in the grip of Lindbergh mania. And suddenly, Lynn Pickard's proposal didn't seem so out there after all. The end result, or at least the beginning of the end result, was the airfield that drew that crowd to 15,000 in October. As we can see from an aerial photograph taken in 1929, and I have it with me, a visual aid, probably the first aerial photograph in Dansville history, there wasn't much to it at first, save for the words Dansville Airport laid out in big white letters made from crushed stone upon the ground. It may not seem like much, but it was better than what lost airmen had to do before that, which was dive bomb railroad stations to try to read the name on the depot. Still, it was a start, and for Lynn Pickard, who naturally was appointed airport manager, it was an obvious hour of triumph. But fads and fancies come and go, and Pickard must have understood that the airport's sustained existence would be an ongoing effort, For one thing, the federal government's newly enacted Air Commerce Act set ever more stringent safety standards for airports, standards that would soon exclude a simple grassy field. Fortunately, so to speak, the Great Depression came along, and with it came tens of thousands of dollars for federally allocated work relief projects. The airport was expanded, and the runways were extended to accommodate aircraft with far lengthier landing requirements than Lynn Pickard's old biplane. The hangar was completed in 1934 at a cost of $14,000, and by 1939 a lighting system, a weather bureau, and a teletype system were installed, and the onset of World War II brought still more federal funding and more improvements, including better paved runways and surface water drainage, all under Pickard's supervision and encouragement. He would also lend a hand in the creation of an airport in Batavia in 1944. Meanwhile, back in Dansville, Pickard was among those who provided flight instructions for Navy cadets who were housed in the Physical Culture Hotel during their stay in Dansville. There were also civilian pilot training programs, as well as training for so-called grasshopper squadrons who would perform vital stateside duties such as courier and liaison flights. After the war, former servicemen would receive flight training under the GI Bill. Today, the airport is about 3 times the size of the original 50 acres. While he continued his affiliation with Dansville's airport, Pickard would also enter the world of politics. Nor was he the first in his family to do so. His father, J.C. Pickard, served for 10 years as West Sparta's town supervisor, and his uncle, C. Elmer Pickard, served as Dansville's mayor in the 1920s. Lynn Pickard would serve multiple terms as North Dansville town supervisor. Pickard was a Democrat, and in those years, the town supervisor's job swung back and forth between Democrats and Republicans with an almost pendulum-like regularity. He won the job in 1939, lost it in 1943, won it in 1945, lost it in 1949, and won it back in 1953. One of his most significant civic accomplishments was to push forward the building of the new town hall, completed in 1954, and replacing the 124-year-old rundown former church building that the town and village had to make do with for decades. Granted, the new building wasn't everything Pickard was hoping for. He'd envisioned a full-blown community center, complete with recreation facilities and even a public swimming pool. Yes, back then Democrats liked to spend tax money too. Obviously, he didn't get his way, but at least he convinced his more fiscally conservative colleagues that the building should at least have restrooms, which their original plans lacked. A small but fairly important victory. He also served as Dansville's postmaster for 4 years and town highway superintendent for 14 years, and in 1948 ran, although unsuccessfully, for state assemblyman. He was also active in numerous local organizations, including the American Legion, the Moose Club, the Fish and Game Club, the Masons, the Exchange Club, and the Board of Trade. He retired from town supervisor in 1955. He was succeeded by Robert Hart. Maybe you've heard of him. Lynn Pickard passed away in 1968 at the age of 79, survived by his wife, the former Elizabeth Wolfe. He had no children, only his baby, the Dansville Airport. In 1976, the Dansville Pilots Association proposed that Pickard's Field be added to the airport's name. And in 1989, the Dansville Area Historical Society selected Lynn Pickard as one of the first 10 inductees into the Dansville Hall of Fame, along with such notables as Dan Faulkner, Clara Barton, and F.A. Owen. He deserved those honors. He deserves this one. Thank you.
I was a very lucky kid. I had two sets of parents growing up. So the story goes, Elizabeth Pickard, Lynn's wife, said to my mom-to-be, Mark, you have two already, let me have this one. And I grew up spending, knew nothing about it except where I was, which was half my childhood life was at Lynn and Elizabeth's home, and half of it with my mother and father, Dr. T.W. Vanderhoof and Martha Vanderhoof. At the summer of 1938, while I was in, this is my mother related this to me, while in a baby carriage at Pickard's home, my first words weren't mama, it was airplane. Lynn was determined that I was going to be a super pilot. Lynn was an outstanding flight instructor. At Lynn, when the World War II started, the war cloud started in Europe and in Ethiopia before that, and in China by Japan, then the government of the United States started preparing for war, including aviation in a big way. This airport was, because of its proximity to the East Coast, was greatly expanded with runways large enough for a B-17 bomber to be able to, B-17 bombers to be able to fly from it. Lynn was named the head of flight training programs here in town, and the young men in town, and some young girls in town, soon caught the flying bug, there was, Lynn made sure that boys and girls that would be brought to the airport would get an airplane ride and get an airplane ride for free. The adults, of course, had to pay rent for the airplane ride. Me being Lynn's godson, Lynn tried to get me up in an airplane every other week and throughout the war. And it was always in a Piper Cub or a Piper Cub Coupe or a Cub Cruiser. As other young people, older young people, high school graduates, knew that they had a duty to go in the service and serve, and many local Dansville young men enlisted to become pilots, and they did to a great extent, more than any other community in Livingston County. But of course, because we had this airport, and they'd been up in an airplane, they had a ride, they'd experienced flying an airplane, and they wanted to do it. And some of the local boys that did that were Cubby Culbertson, Billy Blum, Pete LaForce, Fran Henty, Bob Conway, Fred Rowan, Jim Depew, Martin DeLong, Charlie Hughes, Bill Hughes, Dave Molyneux, Elwood Krishner, Ulna Seiler, and Edward Kelly. All of those men went on to become military pilots, and they all came home after the war, except for 4 who came home underneath the flag. Dansville Airport, Lynn went on to teach me He tried having me land the airplane at age 7 with him working the throttle and the rudder pedals, because I couldn't reach the rudder pedals yet. But I could reach the stick, and he told me what to do. He tried telling me what to do as he did the right thing with the throttle and the rudder pedals. And it didn't look pretty at first. So we tried again. He tried again. And that was even worse. So we decided that I had to grow up before I could take flying lessons. When I was 15 years old, the last month I was 15, he started me on my lessons, hopefully so that I could solo. He could turn me loose to make 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop by myself. And it was a stormy, windy day. But the wind let up toward the end of the day, and he soloed me. And my landings weren't pretty then either. And I have a movie to prove it. But I went on, and later on, after I went in the service and I became an instructor, I instructed for 37 years, and I've been flying. I still fly. It's for 64 years, and I've tried to do what Lynn said and not have an accident, because you can really get hurt in an airplane crash. So I've had no accidents or incidents in 64 years, and I'm awfully proud of it. Thank you.
One more round of applause for Lynn Pickard. Our next inductee, E. Philip Saunders, introduced by John Adamski.
Thank you, Dan. Before dinner, when I brought this notebook up and set it on the podium, Dr. Eliotto said to me, "Hey, John, you only have 3 to 5 minutes." But there's only a couple of pages in here, so I'm going to make the time count. First of all, I want to say that I'm truly honored to present this next nominee for induction to the Dansville Wall of Pride. And I'm honored because he specifically asked for me to make this presentation. He is a man who really needs no introduction. Simply mention the name Phil, and everyone in the Dansville Ocean community knows who you mean. Although Phil Saunders is not native to the area, he adopted Ocean as his future place of residence in the 1960s when he bought 80 acres in the Ocean Valley in a partnership with his friend Nelson Mason. That initial purchase has grown over the years into the expansive piece of real estate known as Sugar Creek Farms, which now covers thousands of acres in the valley and beyond. E. Philip Saunders was born in Rochester and grew up in Livonia. In 1958, he convinced his father to convert his Henrietta gas station into the region's first truck stop. That move proved to be so insightful that it evolved into the nation's largest chain of truck stops, known today as Travel Centers of America. But that was just the beginning. Phil's entrepreneurial nature led him to establish a number of other successful business ventures over the years, including the Sugar Creek Farms chain of convenience stores, car and truck rental franchises, Griffith Energy Corporation, Valley Fuels, and Genesee Regional Bank, just to name a few. But Phil is not just a man with a good head for business. He's also a man with a good heart. In 1997, he helped found the American Rock Salt Holdings LLC in Groveland in order to put hundreds of miners back to work after a mine collapse permanently closed the nearby Retzoff salt mine. Today, American Rock Salt is the largest salt-producing mine in the United States. His ownership interest in Bristol Harbor Resort and in the Swain Ski and Snowboard Center also provided hundreds of jobs and improved the quality of life for residents and tourists throughout our region. Phil has devoted countless hours as a board member of numerous companies, medical facilities, educational institutions, and charitable organizations, and his philanthropy can be seen throughout the region. He founded the Saunders College of Business at the Rochester Institute of Technology with a $13 million gift, and he provides tuition scholarships for Livingston County students to attend there. He also funded construction of the Saunders Research Building at the University of Rochester Medical Center with a $10 million donation. In 2011, when the Dansville Central School District was faced with a fiscal crisis that threatened school programs, Phil organized a coalition to provide after-school programming for at-risk students in Dansville. This program, called Encompass, continues to provide educational support and real-world hands-on learning for disadvantaged students at no cost to families or taxpayers. Locally, Phil and his wife Carol funded the construction of the Saunders Surgical Center at Noyes Memorial Hospital in 2006 and were the lead donors for the Mary Saunders Bierman Emergency Department, which opened in 2014, less than 2 years after losing their daughter Mary to cancer. More recently, Phil and Carol announced their donation of $1 million to build the E. Michael Saunders Imaging Services Department at Noyes Hospital in memory of their son Michael, who sadly passed away in April. Now let me tell you about the Phil Saunders that I know. To me, he is not only a successful agriculturalist, businessman, and entrepreneur, he's not a pinky finger, diamond ring kind of guy. He's an everyday regular Joe. He's a serious conservationist and an avid outdoorsman who loves to fish, hunt, and simply spend time in the woods. He even mows his own trails. His hunting lodge, which Phil calls his cabin, is accessible by driving through the only covered bridge in Livingston County. And it's a replica of an Adirondack Great Camp combined with a natural history museum. Several weeks ago, Phil was a few minutes late for a meeting with me, and he explained that he had just finished painting a door on a cabin and needed to get cleaned up. Sometimes you'll find him in Rogers and Tenbrook or Tractor Supply browsing for some hardware for a project he's working on, or having dinner with Carol at the bar at Scoville. Other times I've seen him strolling along Main Street and stopping to chat with passers-by. The bottom line is this: despite all that he has accomplished and all that he has contributed, Phil is just a regular guy, and I am proud to call him a friend. On a couple of occasions, now Phil's not going to like this, I've mentioned that I would like to write a book. The title would be The Truck Stops Here, the E. Phillips Saunders story. The last time I brought it up, Phil said, "I have no doubt that you could make me look good, but I think I'll pass." Phil, I think if anybody has made you look good, it's Phil Saunders.
I'd like to start out by thanking Paula Lador, who is the superintendent of schools here in Dansville. We're lucky to have a person of that quality running our school system, because there's a lot of competition around New York State for great superintendents, and we're fortunate to have him. We probably wouldn't have him except he came out of Tupper Lake, and you know, this is almost like Tupper Lake, but maybe a step up. So, and then somebody else mentioned Amy Pollard, who's here tonight, who runs a great hospital, and we are so blessed to have her here in Dansville, putting together a great hospital, and we're now very fortunate to have it tied into the University of Rochester, the strong memorial system. I don't know why my wife didn't do the introduction tonight, but I'm quite fortunate. You did a great job for Mr. Packard, but Carol might have sliced me up pretty good, wouldn't it? Probably wouldn't have been as good as Johnny. I have with me tonight my grandson Jim, and my great-granddaughter Caitlin. So we got 3 generations here tonight. 2 of those generations have graduated from the Dansville High School. We got 1 that's graduating this year from that high school. And then I also got my daughter-in-law, Kathy Saunders, here with us tonight. But it's true, I didn't grow up in Dansville. We have sort of adopted it as our home now. We're not considered natives yet, but we have been here 50 years. The people in Hoshin, that still doesn't cut it. We're getting close, but I don't think we'll ever quite be natives. Grew up actually I was born in Dewey Avenue in Rochester and wound up growing up in Livonia. Hank Weber, who was here earlier tonight, and I don't know if Paul didn't want him to stay or not. He kicked him out of here. He got a couple of drinks. He said, all I remember about it, he called me one day about 2 weeks ago, and he said, I can't believe they're putting you into the Wall of Pride at the high school. He says, the last time I remember you, I was still digging the mud out of my football helmet, which I sort of like Dansville for that reason. We beat your football team 56-0, I think, and then I pitched a no-hitter against them in the spring. So those were my first memories of Dansville, and they weren't bad. So I don't mean to brag because I don't usually, but I thought it was a good ride. I've been very fortunate with the businesses I've started, and many years ago we decided we were going to build a truck stop in Dansville, New York, and as I toured the country and people would show me a place where they wanted to build a truck stop, and in some cases people had built a truck stop and they weren't doing very well and they would want to sell it to me, and I'd say, why did you build it here? He said, well, I happen to live up the road a mile and this land was available. So when I got ready to build the one in Dansville, I really searched my soul, because I said, I've seen 10 people get caught in this trap, and I don't know if I should build one in the town I now live in, because it might catch me in the same trap. But we built it in 1979, so it's 40 years old next year. It's been very successful, and it's employed a lot of people from this town. And the only thing I would say about our community is, thankfully, we have Interstate 390 to get people to Rochester for jobs, because we've lost a tremendous amount of jobs in this community. As you know, over the years, we've got LMC and we've got a couple other industries that have come back in here. But if there's anything Dansville needs, is we do need another good industry to support Main Street, our school systems, and the different things that go on in this community. And that's one of the things that Carol and I hope to do, because one of the great draws to a community is a good school system and a good hospital. And we've got 2 of the elements that we need. Now we just need a good, solid industry. So if anybody's holding back on us out there tonight, we'd welcome a new industry. So again, I appreciate this award very much, and thank you for the honor and for the recognition. Appreciate it.
One more round of applause for Phil Saunders. Before my closing remarks, I just want to remind all of the inductees, if they could come up at the end, we'll get a group picture. Please bring your plaques. There's also the covers that go on your plaques as well to take home. And there's also some table favors. Please take a favor with you for the fall season here. And there was a remark earlier about possibly not saying something profound at these. Well, I'm going to leave you with a profound remark. because I still have it written down here and I haven't used it yet tonight. Other than the haiku. So I just want to leave everybody with, what if there were no hypothetical questions? I'm pretty sure that's why I was last on the list, because it's not very hard. But I would like to thank all of the inductees and the presenters tonight and everybody who helped put this together, Dr. Aliotto, and on behalf of the Dansville Central School District, thank you for all of you have done for us, for the community, and for others. One more round of applause for all of them. So as we end the evening, if we could have the inductees come up, feel free to have another drink. There's probably still some more food if Kent wants to hand out some to-go platters. Take the party favors, and in the famous words of Semisonic, it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Thank you for coming, everybody.
His wife passed away. I didn't say a thing.